Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to discuss about the development of midgut. This part is the midgut here. In the fifth week of development, the primitive midgut, it extends as a straight tube from the anterior intestinal portal here. This is the part, this is the anterior intestinal portal, and this is the posterior intestinal portal. So in between them the midgut extends as a straight tube, right? In the adult, the midgut extends, or the derivatives of the midgut are that it begins, the starting point of the midgut is just distal to the entrance of the bile duct. This is the bile duct opening into the duodenum, right? So just immediately distal to the opening of the bile duct into the duodenum and terminates at the junction of proximal 2/3 and distal 1/3 of the transverse colon. So that is the extent of the midgut in adults, derivatives of midgut in adults. And this straight tube, it is suspended from the posterior abdominal wall by a dorsal mesentery. And this dorsal mesentery, so this one here in this image, this is the dorsal mesentery. So this midgut is suspended from the posterior abdominal wall by this dorsal mesentery, which conveys the blood vessels. This is the superior mesenteric artery, which is the which contributes the blood supply to the midgut derivatives, right? And point to be noted here is there is no ventral mesentery, whereas in the foregut we have seen the ventral mesentery, which forms the lesser omentum, falciform ligament, coronary ligaments, all that they are the derivatives of the ventral mesogastrium in the foregut, right? But here there is no ventral mesentery for the midgut. And this midgut communicates ventrally here, communicates ventrally with the extra embryonic part of the yolk sac by a vitello-intestinal duct. This is called as vitello-intestinal duct or the yolk sac. Okay, yolk sac or the vitello-intestinal duct. Then as the development progresses, the midgut grows in length. See, it was a straight tube in the beginning, in the fifth week. Then as the development progresses, it increases in its length more rapidly than the capacity of the abdominal cavity, and that forms a U-shaped loop called the primary intestinal loop. This loop is called as the primary intestinal loop. Because of the rapid growth in the length of the midgut, this loop is formed. And the vitello-intestinal duct is attached to the apex of the loop. This is the U-shaped loop, right? And this part is the apex of the loop. Then this vitello-intestinal duct is attached to this apex of the intestinal loop. And the superior mesenteric artery runs forward from this is the aorta, abdominal aorta, and from here the superior mesenteric artery runs in the dorsal mesentery, midway between the proximal and distal limbs, right? This intestinal loop we can divide into a proximal limb and a distal limb, right? In between them the superior mesenteric artery is running. And so this proximal limb is called as the cephalic limb of the midgut, and this caudal limb is also called as the distal limb. Okay, distal or caudal, cranial or cephalic limb, right? And it is also named as, because in relation to the artery, superior mesenteric artery, it is also called as the prearterial segment and the postarterial segment of the midgut. Okay, so it is the cephalic limb or the proximal limb or the prearterial limb or prearterial segment, this one. Whereas this one, it is called as postarterial segment or caudal limb of the midgut. And this cephalic limb, this forms the caudal part of the duodenum. Okay, this complete thing caudal part of the duodenum, distal to the entrance of the bile duct, and this also forms most of the jejunum and most of the complete jejunum, and most of the ileum is formed from this cephalic limb or the prearterial segment. Then from the caudal limb or the post-arterial segment, the terminal part of the ileum, okay, so this will be the terminal part of the ileum, and this is the cecal diverticulum here. So terminal part of the ileum, cecum and appendix and ascending colon and proximal 2/3 of the transverse colon. These are the derivatives of the post-arterial segment, right? So this one is the prearterial segment and this is the post-arterial segment. Derivatives of prearterial segment is caudal portion of the duodenum distal to the entrance of bile duct, then jejunum, complete jejunum, and most of the ileum. It is formed by the cephalic limb or the prearterial segment. Post-arterial segment gives rise to terminal part of the ileum, cecum and appendix, ascending colon, and proximal 2/3 of the transverse colon. So these are the derivatives of the midgut. Then in the 6th week, a cecal diverticulum develops from the anti-mesenteric border. Now this border we are calling it as anti-mesenteric because now this border, it gives attachment to the dorsal mesentery, right? So this is called as mesenteric border of the midgut, whereas the opposite side, this is called as the anti-mesenteric border. So from the anti-mesenteric border of the midgut, a cecal diverticulum develops from the caudal limb close to the apex of the intestinal loop. This is the apex, right? So close to the apex, the caudal limb gives rise to a cecal diverticulum in 6th week of development. And same time, when the cecal diverticulum is given rise, when the cecal diverticulum starts increasing in its size, this vitalointestinal duct slowly regresses and completely closed, right? It regresses totally. And the proximal part of the cecal diverticulum, this part, it enlarges to form the cecum, whereas the distal part, it will be narrowed and grows in length to form the vermiform appendix, right? So the cecal diverticulum appears at about 6th week of intrauterine life. Now, what is this superior retention band? This is also called as ligament of Treitz. So in this image, if we see, this is the caudal part of the duodenum, which is derived from the cephalic limb, and this is the jejunum. So the dorsal end of the cephalic limb here, this is going to form the future duodenojejunal flexure. This is the duodenum and this is the jejunum. So this duodenojejunal flexure, this is anchored to the body wall. You can see this band which is anchoring it to the body wall by a mesenchymal condensation of the dorsal mesentery. So this part is nothing but the mesenchymal condensation of the dorsal mesentery, and this is known as the superior retention band or ligament of Treitz. So this band persists in the adult as the suspensory muscle of the duodenum, or also called as ligament of Treitz. This one, it is also called as suspensory muscle of the duodenum or ligament of Treitz. And similarly, the dorsal end of the caudal limb, which is the future colic angle, this one, this is the colic angle, is attached to the body wall by an inferior retention band. This one is called as inferior retention band. So this is anchoring the intestine, large intestine, to the posterior body wall, right? So this is called as inferior retention band, and this in adult it forms the phrenico-colic ligament. This is the phrenico-colic ligament, right? And the base of the midgut loop is somewhat narrow and is known as duodenocolic isthmus. So that image is not very proper here. Duodenocolic isthmus is one more point to be noted here. Then what is this physiological umbilical hernia? So development of the primary intestinal loop is characterized by rapid elongation, particularly in the cephalic limb. The cephalic limb is rapidly elongated. Now, as a result of rapid growth and expansion of the liver here, so simultaneously all the organ systems are developed in the body in its own pace. Here, while this intestinal loop is developed, the liver is also in the process of development. It is also increasing in its growth. So then what happens is, this abdominal cavity, it becomes too small to contain these intestinal loops. So that's why they enter into the extra embryonic cavity in the umbilical cord during 6th week of development. It starts in the end of the 5th and in the beginning of the 6th week. So this umbilical cord in the extra embryonic cavity, in the 6th week of development, the intestinal loops will enter into this extra embryonic cavity, and this is called as physiological umbilical hernia. And this physiological umbilical hernia, it persists or it starts during 5th week and remains in this position up to 10th week. Up to 10th week, this intestinal loops will remain in this physiological umbilical hernia, right? And this, when the intestinal loops are there within this umbilical cord, they are called as they form the umbilical sac, and they persist here from 6th to 10th week of development, right? So this is physiological umbilical hernia. Because of the rapid growth of the liver and the kidneys here in the posterior abdominal wall, the abdominal cavity is small in the 6th week of development, right? So it can't accommodate the intestinal loops. So it becomes obligatory for this intestinal loop to enter into the, or to herniate into the extra embryonic part of the coelomic cavity. And this actually this remains patent at this period of development, and these intestinal loops will form the umbilical sac. So this physiological umbilical hernia extends from 5th to 10th week of development, end of the 5th, or you can just say 6th to 10th week of development. Then the subsequent development of the midgut can be divided into 3 stages, right? First stage, second stage and third stage. Subsequent development can be divided into 3 stages. Now when this U-shaped loop lodges in the umbilical sac, the cephalic limb of the midgut, this part which is going to give rise to the small gut or small intestine, it is subjected to downward pressure by the liver. Okay, downward pressure by the right lobe of the liver. It causes pressure on the cephalic limb of the intestinal loop, right? Eventually what happens is, the cephalic limb rotates downwards. Okay, it rotates downwards like this, downwards. And or if you just see, this is the cephalic limb and this is the caudal limb, or pre-arterial and post-arterial segments of the midgut, right? So this cephalic limb, it turns downwards, okay, and then what happens, because it is turning downwards, this caudal limb has to turn upwards. Okay, so now what we are discussing is the first stage of further development of the midgut. So in that, the rapidly growing liver, the right lobe of the liver, it will cause pressure on the cephalic limb, which causes the cephalic limb to turn downwards like this. In this cross section, if we see, this is turning downwards. Because it is turning downwards, the caudal limb has to turn upwards. Okay, as a consequence, the caudal limb will, which is nothing but the part which is giving rise to the large gut or the large intestine, that will turn upwards and to the left. So cephalic limb is turning downwards and to the right, whereas caudal limb is turning upwards and to the left. Okay, and During the first stage, the intestinal loop rotates through an angle of about 90 degrees. If you see, it is turning like this, right? So it rotates around 90 degrees around the axis of the superior mesenteric artery. This is the superior mesenteric artery. So around this axis, the midgut intestinal loop is rotating around with an angle of about 90 degrees. And when viewed from the front, the rotation looks anti-clockwise, right? Because it is coming this way and this is going upwards. The direction of the rotation is anti-clockwise. Okay, so that is the first stage. So in first stage, what is happening? There is a 90-degree rotation of the intestinal loop. Cephalic limb turns down and right, caudal limb turns upwards and to the left, right? So that is the first stage with 90-degree rotation. Now we are discussing the rotation of the midgut. Altogether, in the entire development process, the midgut rotates for around 90 degrees, sorry, 270 degrees on overall. So here 90 degrees is finished in the first stage. Now coming to the second stage. So in second stage, what happens? The intestines are in the umbilical hernia, right? So for about 5 weeks, from 5th to 10th week of development, the intestinal loop, part of the intestinal loop is in the physiological umbilical hernia. So this now, the cephalic limb has turned downwards and to the right, whereas the caudal limb has turned upwards and to the left. So cephalic limb is now the right limb and caudal limb is now the left limb. Clear? Then this cephalic limb or the right limb, it undergoes enormous enlargement, increases in its length. So this is arranged in the series of coils now. Okay, it was a straight tube here, right? It was a straight tube here, but now in the second stage it has become coiled because of its rapid growth in the length. And meanwhile, what happens? This cecal bulge is there. This exhibits prominence in the left limb, right? So this ring what you are seeing is within the umbilical hernia, within the opening, right? This is the communication. So the cephalic limb has shown coils and the caudal limb shows the cecal enlargement. Then progressive decrease in the dimensions of the liver and mesonephric kidneys, and also concomitant expansion of the abdominal part of the coelomic cavity, right? Because during the development, the abdominal cavity will increase in its capacity as the age advances of the embryo, of the fetus, sorry. So then what happens? The abdominal cavity now has enlarged and the liver and the kidneys, they regress in size gradually. So then now the space is created for the intestinal loop to return back to the abdominal cavity because the abdomen has enlarged in its size. Clear? So then what happens? This increased or expanded abdominal part of the coelomic cavity, it will allow the herniated intestinal loop to re-enter into the abdomen. Okay, so that means it goes back into the abdominal cavity. So this was actually in the physiological umbilical hernia in all this period. So this is now returning back. You can see that increase in the coils is seen because of the rapid growth of the cephalic limb or the right limb. So you are seeing all these coils. Now this entire part, it is ready to go back into the abdominal cavity. But as a single mass, it can't enter into the abdominal cavity because this communication, the opening through which it has entered into the umbilical sac is very narrow. So this complete intestinal loop cannot go back as a single piece of mass or n mass, it can't go into the abdominal cavity. So part by part the loops have to enter into the abdomen. So what happens is here, because the intestinal loop becomes much coiled and bulky by this time, and the umbilical ring, that is the communication between intra and extra embryonic coeloms, this is too small, so it can't allow easy return of the intestinal loop. So this withdrawal of the herniated mass therefore takes place in a definitive order. That means part by part it enters into the abdominal cavity. So the right limb or the small gut portion of the midgut, this enters first. Okay, takes place, this is reduced first, or it returns back to the abdomen in first place. So this is the direction it enters back into the abdominal cavity. And the cecum, this has enlarged, right? So that's why as single mass it is not allowing. So first what happens is the right limb goes inside the abdominal cavity first. Okay, and then next comes the coils of the small intestine. When they enter into the abdominal cavity, they occupy the right part of the abdominal cavity, but the condition so happens that right half of the abdomen fails to accommodate the huge aggregation of the intestinal coils, because the liver is there, kidney is there. So this right limb can't accommodate only in the right side of the abdomen. So what happens, as a result, the proximal part of the midgut passes dorsal to the origin of superior mesenteric artery. Now this is the origin of superior mesenteric artery here. So this goes dorsal to the, it comes on to this side. The right limb comes onto the dorsal side of the origin of superior mesenteric artery and pushes the dorsal mesentery of the hindgut and the colic angle to the left side. Okay, so this one here, this is the colic angle, right? So because this is entering into the abdomen, this colic angle is pushed towards the left side, and these coils, they occupy the dorsal portion of the abdominal cavity. So thus the coils of the small gut occupy the dorsal, right and left parts of the abdominal cavity, because only on the right side they can't be accommodated. So they enter into the dorsal part and spread along the right and left side of the dorsal part of the abdominal cavity. Then that is the right limb, how it enters into the abdomen. Then the left limb of the midgut, that is including the cecum, ascending colon and the proximal 2/3 of the transverse colon, returns last into the abdomen. Right limb has gone first and the left limb enters last. And the cecum and the midgut colon appear initially in the left part of the abdomen, and find that the left part is all flooded with the coils of small intestine. So the cecum first enters, it goes towards the left side of the abdomen here like this. Now this is all in the abdominal cavity. So the cecum has returned back to the abdominal cavity along with its large gut portion. So it goes to the left side first, but left side is all filled with all these coils. So then what happens, it will go upside and reaches the left epigastric area. Sorry, left hypogastric area, this one here. And here also again all the coils of the intestine are there. So it comes back towards the right hypochondriac area here, right here, right hypochondriac area, and then rotates down to reach the its right iliac fossa, its adult position here, right? So what is the rotation of the cecum here? It has entered into the left side of the abdomen, okay, into the left iliac fossa. Then it goes towards the left hypochondriac region. Then it reaches the right hypochondriac region or subhepatic region, and then it reaches its final position, right? So this is the second stage of the midgut rotation. So wherein in the first stage what has happened, this cephalic limb has turned downwards and to the right, caudal has turned upwards and to the left. That is first stage. In the second stage, the length of the right limb is increased and it is thrown into coils, and then after 10 weeks of stay in the physiological umbilical hernia, it now returns back into the abdominal cavity, because the abdominal cavity has increased in its capacity, and comparatively the size of the liver and the kidneys is reduced at this stage. So this space is created for these intestinal coils to go back into the abdominal cavity. But because the umbilical ring, which is the communication of intra and extraembryonic coelom, that is very narrow, all the coils of the intestine or the midgut cannot enter as a single piece. So one by one, first the right limb and then the left limb will enter into the abdominal cavity. So the right limb, it goes inside, but on the right side the liver and all is there, so it can't occupy only the right part of the abdominal cavity. So it pushes the colic angle towards the left side and occupies the dorsal portion on both right and left sides of the abdominal cavity. That is the right limb. Then the left limb with the enlarged cecum and appendix and this large gut portion, it first enters into the abdominal cavity and reaches the left part. But here also it is all flooded with the coils of the intestine, small intestine, right? So in search of space to sit properly, the cecum will turn upwards towards the left hypochondriac region, right? And then there also the spleen and all is there, it can't accommodate there, so it turns towards the right hypochondriac region. And in the subhepatic space, the liver is always a large organ, so it will also be compressing the cecum. So again it comes back into its last position where it is free to move. This is the right iliac fossa. Clear? So here how many degrees of rotation happened? The cecal diverticulum has gone here, one more 90 degrees is added, and then here one more 90 degrees is added, right? From here to here 190, and from here to here another 90. So altogether in the first stage what happened, 90 degrees has completed, and in the second stage actually only till the subhepatic area we call it as the second stage. Okay, then in the third stage the cecum and appendix will grow caudally from the subhepatic region, and it reaches its right iliac fossa, definitive position, right? The portion of the colon thus formed extending from the right iliac fossa to the subhepatic regions here, this persists as the ascending colon, and the total range of rotation executed by the cecum and appendix around the axis of the superior mesenteric artery is about 270 degrees, that is 3 right angles. First 90 degrees takes place within the physiological umbilical hernia or even before that stage, and then the remaining 180 occurs within the abdomen after the intestinal loop is reduced from the umbilical coelom, right? So altogether 270 degrees. 190 is this here, okay, this one 190. Then the cecum and appendix from here to here is 190. Then from here to here is another 90. So altogether 270 degrees of rotation, midgut rotation takes place. And when the rotation is complete, the derivatives of the midgut undergo a process of fixation. So the dorsal mesentery of the ascending colon here, the dorsal mesentery of the ascending colon usually disappears, and its posterior surface becomes non-peritoneal. Okay, so ascending colon posterior surface becomes non-peritoneal, and prearterial segment of the dorsal mesentery of the midgut persists as the mesentery, which suspends the jejunum and ileum from the posterior abdominal wall. Okay, this one, this is the prearterial segment of the dorsal mesentery, right? And this prearterial is forming the caudal portion of the duodenum and then jejunum and most of the ileum, right? So the coils of jejunum and ileum are suspended from the posterior abdominal wall by mesentery. So that mesentery is nothing but the derivative of prearterial segment of the primitive dorsal mesentery. Clear? And post-arterial segment of the dorsal mesentery persists in the part to form the transverse mesocolon, because here it is forming terminal part of the ileum, cecum and appendix, ascending colon, and then this portion it is forming the transverse colon, right? So the part of the dorsal mesentery in connection to this post-arterial segment, it forms the transverse mesocolon. And the enlargement of the omental bursa or the lesser sac following the rotation of the stomach, it allows a caudal extension of the infolded dorsal mesogastrium superficial to the transverse colon and its mesocolon. So this infolded mesogastrium persists in adult as the greater omentum. So here the stomach is there, right? So from the stomach, the dorsal mesogastrium of the stomach that extends caudalwards, downwards, forms a white apron. I have discussed in the earlier classes, if you remember. So that's going to form the greater omentum. Therefore, this third stage of development of midgut completes the rotation of the intestinal loop, and this is followed by fixation or suspension of different parts of the gut. Now understood? This dorsal mesentery, this is going to form, what is it forming here in the prearterial segment? It forms the mesentery, which suspends the coils of jejunum and ileum. The post-arterial segment is going to form the transverse mesocolon that suspends the transverse colon from the posterior abdominal wall. And this transverse mesocolon along with the transverse colon here, it is covered anteriorly by the greater omentum, which is nothing but the caudal extension of the dorsal mesogastrium, right? That is the rotation of the midgut. Coming to the histogenesis of the midgut and hindgut, the mucus lining and the glands opening in the gut are endodermal in origin. Now this is the mucosa, okay. This is the submucosa. This portion is the mucosa. So the mucus lining and the glands present here, this is the lymphoid tissue and the ducts of the glands. So they are all endodermal in origin. Then this is the submucosa, muscular and serous coats. So this is the submucosa, this is the muscular, and this is the serous coats. These are all derived from the splanchnic mesoderm, which we have discussed in the introduction class also. And the circular muscle layers, this one is the circular muscle here in the muscularis externa. So they are differentiated earlier than the longitudinal muscles, okay. And this muscularis mucosa appears at a later period after the differentiation of muscularis externa. Then the muscularis mucosa appears. So that is, it appears in a later period. Then the peristaltic movements starts from the 4th month of intrauterine life, and meconium, which is discharged from the large gut after birth, consists of, which is the first fecal matter of the fetus, I mean after birth. So that is called as meconium. So this meconium consists of a mixture of bile, secretions of intestinal glands, and amniotic fluid, which is occasionally swallowed by the fetus. So the meconium, which is the first stool of the fetus, that consists of bile and intestinal gland secretions and as well as amniotic fluid. Now coming to the congenital anomalies of the midgut. So they are when the vitalointestinal duct remains completely patent, contents of the small gut are discharged at the umbilicus here. So this is the vitalointestinal duct, which actually after the appearance and enlargement of the cecal diverticulum, it is regressed, right? But in few of the children this persists. So when this connection is patent, then it results in fecal umbilical fistula due to persistence of the yolk sac or the vitalointestinal duct. So the umbilicus will discharge feces here. Okay. Then one more thing is Vitelline sinus. So one end of the yolk sac is open and the other end is closed, then it forms the Vitelline sinus, right? And Vitelline cyst is when the two ends of the yolk sac are closed but still a part of the yolk sac is opened between the two ends. So this one forms a Vitelline cyst here, right? Two ends are closed but in the middle portion it is patent, so that forms Vitelline cyst. And a fibrous band is obliteration of the yolk sac occurs, but it remains as a fibrous band. This complete sorry, it is not shown in this image, but complete obliteration occurs, but instead of regressing it remains as a band, so that is called as the fibrous band, and because of that band the intestinal obstruction may occur as a complication. Okay. And sometimes this diverticulum can be attached to the umbilical region by Vitelline ligament with the possibility of Vitelline cysts or even a patent Vitelline canal, forming a Vitelline fistula when the umbilical cord is cut. When the umbilical cord is cut, then it results in the fistula here. Okay. Then Meckel's diverticulum. What is this Meckel's diverticulum? This is the true diverticula of all three layers of the small intestine are seen in that projection here. This one is okay. So this is caused by incomplete obliteration of the Vitelline duct here. So only distal portion will be obliterated and proximal portion is patent here. So that results in the Vitelline Meckel's diverticulum. So this Meckel's diverticulum has got a rule of 2's, that is it is found in 2% of human subjects, and its proximal part persists as Meckel's diverticulum, which is attached to the anti-mesenteric border of the ileum at about 2 to 3 feet proximal to the ileocecal junction. Now this one is the ileocecal junction, right? Ileum entering into the cecum. So proximal to this 2 to 3 feet proximal to the ileocecal junction, we are going to see this diverticulum, and usually the diverticulum is 2 inches long and possesses the same caliber as that of the ileum. That means all three layers are seen and the lumen also is patent, and the tip of the diverticulum may be free or may be attached by a fibrous band to the umbilicus or any other abdominal viscera. Here this one, the surgical removal of the Meckel's diverticulum here, right? The structural coat of the diverticulum is similar to that of the ileum, I have told you, and occasionally oxyntic cells secreting hydrochloric acid are found in this mucous membrane. So the heterotopic pancreatic tissue may be present in the muscular coat, and the following complications may arise from the Meckel's diverticulum. What are the complications? Formation of peptic ulcer, because the oxyntic cells secreting the HCl are present, so that can result in peptic ulcer, followed by perforation also can be seen, and inflammation can be there, that will result in peritonitis, inflammation of this diverticulum, and intestinal obstruction. Sometimes a loop of the small gut may encircle this fibrous band if it is there on this side. Then the loop of the small intestine can encircle that fibrous band, and that can produce the intestinal obstruction, right? So these are the complications related to the Meckel's diverticulum. So enterocystoma is the proximal and distal portions of the yolk sac are closed, obliterated, but whereas the middle portion remains persistent, then this is called as enterocystoma. Okay, and the cyst thus formed will be seen beneath the umbilicus here. This is the umbilicus, so beneath the umbilicus we will see the enterocystoma. Then raspberry tumor, on rare occasion, a distal portion of the vitelline duct persists and rest disappears. Okay, so here if you see, the proximal portion is obliterated, whereas the distal portion is persistent. So then what happens, the distal part is evaginated from the umbilicus. Now here it will be like this during development, then afterward during delivery time or at the time of delivery it will evaginate out. And this distal part evaginated from the umbilicus due to increased intra-abdominal pressure produces a raspberry tumor. This one, red tumor, this is raspberry tumor. Okay. Then errors of rotation of midgut. So the non-rotation of the midgut umbilical ring is dilated and permits the umbilical hernia en masse. So during the second stage what happens is, sometimes the umbilical ring remains dilated and this permits the reduction of the umbilical hernia en masse after initial 90 degrees rotation. As a result, the small gut occupies the right side of the abdomen and the cecum with the associated colon accommodated on the left side. So as a single mass, if it enters because of the dilated umbilical ring, that results in non-rotation of the midgut in the second stage. Then one more thing is the malrotation or reverse rotation. So here what happens is, the midgut, in this anomaly, the cecum enters the abdomen first through the dilated umbilical ring and rotates upwards and to the right behind the origin of the superior mesenteric artery. Eventually, the transverse colon extends behind the trunk of the superior mesenteric artery and the third part of the duodenum lies in front of the vessel. Actually, it should be behind, the third part should be behind, right? So here if you see, this is the normal thing, the third part should be behind the transverse colon here. But in malrotation what happens is, transverse colon goes behind the third part of the duodenum here. Okay. And during third stage, due to defects in fixation, what happens is, cecum and the appendix may occupy the subhepatic, right lumbar or pelvic regions. So defect in fixation, that can result in cecum and appendix occupying subhepatic region here. Actually from subhepatic region it has to grow down, right? So instead of growing down, in the process of coming down to the right iliac fossa, it may be fixed at the subhepatic region or right lumbar region, or it may go still down into the pelvic region. So these are the defects in fixation. Okay, so one is non-rotation of the gut, when the non-rotation and malrotation both occur when the umbilical ring is dilated. So in non-rotation what is happening, the intestines are entering into the abdominal cavity as a single mass, so that the right limb occupies the right side of the abdomen, left limb occupies the left side of the abdomen. This is what we are seeing here non-rotation. Whereas in malrotation what is happening, instead of the right limb entering into the abdomen first, the left limb enters. Okay, so the left limb enters first and rotates upward and to the right behind the superior mesenteric artery, and transverse colon pass behind the superior mesenteric artery, and third part of the duodenum lies in front of the superior mesenteric artery. Okay, so that is malrotation. And defects in fixation are, the cecum can be in the subhepatic region, or it can be in the right lumbar region, or it can be into the pelvic region, it go into the pelvic region. So these are the errors of rotation of the midgut. And one more point to be noted here is about the Ladd's bands. If the cecum has remained in the right upper quadrant, it may become fixed in that position by peritoneal attachments passing to the right, called as Ladd's bands. These may compress the underlying duodenum and cause the duodenal stenosis. Okay, so what are these Ladd's bands? If the cecum has remained in the right upper quadrant, here if it remains here in a permanent position, so this gets fixed towards the in that position it gets fixed by the peritoneal attachments passing to the right side. Here there will be Ladd's bands. So these may compress the underlying duodenum and cause the duodenal stenosis. One more clinical condition is exomphalos. So what is this exomphalos? When the primitive midgut loop fails to re-enter the abdominal cavity from the physiological umbilical hernia, a bulky mass is found in the umbilical cord at birth. So this condition is known as exomphalos, and here it is covered by amniotic amnion. Okay, the amnion is covering this midgut loop here. So this is exomphalos.
Rotation of the midgut happens during the second month of intrauterine life. This is the gastrointestinal tract, consisting of the foregut, the hindgut, and the midgut. The midgut is continuous with the vitelline duct or yolk stalk, which later becomes obliterated. Here's the aorta. Here are the three arteries that supply the GI tract: the celiac for the foregut, the inferior mesenteric for the hindgut, and the superior mesenteric for the midgut. As the midgut develops, it protrudes into the body stalk, forming a loop, with the superior mesenteric artery forming the axis of the loop. As it protrudes, the midgut loop makes a quarter turn counterclockwise, so its distal part is to the left and its proximal part is to the right. The distal part of the loop develops a bulge that will become the cecum,
first 90 degrees of
and
rotation
the proximal
happens
part of the
here.
loop becomes quite convoluted. During the time these changes are happening, the body continues to grow, and the abdominal cavity becomes large enough to allow the midgut to return. The proximal part of the loop returns first. It passes under the distal part and over to the left. That's towards us in this view. The distal part of the loop returns last. It passes in front of the proximal part and ends up over to the right. Let's look at the same sequence of events from in front and somewhat to the left, so that we can understand how these changes produce a rotation of the midgut. Here's the midgut loop protruding towards us and making its first quarter turn counterclockwise. A bulge appears for the cecum, and the proximal part of the loop becomes convoluted. The abdomen becomes larger, and the proximal limb of the loop returns. It passes under the distal limb, in effect making another quarter turn counterclockwise. Then the distal limb returns, completing the third quarter turn. This proximal part of the midgut, the distal duodenum, ends up behind this distal part of the midgut, the proximal transverse colon.
Thank you.